Hello, this is Photography Gamer, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm reviewing Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. Jedi Fallen Order is an action-adventure game developed by Respawn Entertainment and published by EA. You play as Cal, a Jedi who survived Order 66 when most of the Jedis were slaughtered. Cal starts the game living a regular life, but soon he becomes hunted by the Imperial forces that are on the trail of the remaining Jedis. You have a droid sidekick called BD-1 who helps you with locks and various different technical issues throughout the game. You also have two allies who shuttle you around the galaxy, but they're really just there to initiate conversations and move the plot forwards. They're not like the best characters in the game, but they do a job. The game has 4 difficulty modes. Story mode is what it is. It's the most easy mode I've ever experienced. I would not recommend it. Jedi Knight is kind of like normal, which is okay, but it's still pretty forgiving and it's pretty easy in the long run. I'd recommend Jedi Master, which is kind of hard mode. It's got the most balanced difficulty, it's challenging, but it's not going to ruin your life. If you want to ruin your life, play Jedi Grandmaster mode, and that is really, really difficult because it's so harsh. You get hit a couple of times and you die. The game is set on several different planets which are basically levels with narrow winding pathways. It's not an open world game, but the levels are quite large and quite complicated. Stylistically and in terms of the game structure, it's reminiscent of God of War and Uncharted, and in combat terms it reminded me a little bit of Dark Souls, but not as harsh. The maps you explore are intricately designed, and although it's a linear story, the way you approach it is a little bit more freeform. You can go to different planets and just explore, find things, level up and be more prepared for the late game combat. Traversing the environments is a real challenge because they're so well structured. A lot of areas you won't be able to access at the beginning. Only once you unlock certain things or certain Jedi skills, then you can go back to these planets, revisit the various places and find the little bonus costumes, secrets or weapon additions. Okay, so let's talk about the combat system. It definitely has some similarities to the Dark Souls combat system. You can attack, dodge, block or parry, and you can accumulate experience through every kill. But if you die, you'll lose the experience, and the only way to get it back is to find that enemy and strike them, and then you gain it all back. But if you're worried about the combat, don't be, because it's not on the same level as a Dark Souls game. But in terms of combat, it's a lot more strategic than you'd expect from a standard Star Wars game. One thing that makes the combat more tense is the kind of sparse save points. You can only save at certain locations where you can meditate, you can replenish stim packs, level up your skill tree or just have a rest. But if you do rest, all of the enemies in that area will respawn. So it's a real balancing act when you should rest and when you shouldn't, because some of the enemies you encounter in the game are really difficult and you end up using all of your stim packs, and then you just die halfway to the next checkpoint, so you've got to really balance things off. Taking on large groups is quite tricky, but you do have a lock-on camera and you can also use the force skills to slow your enemies, throw them around or do lots of other stuff. It's one of the most satisfying combat games I've played, and the battles really can feel epic at times. Obviously you have a lightsaber and you can visually customize it. The more you explore, the more parts you'll find, and it's a nice touch to be able to change the appearance at the workbenches that you find throughout the game. The game has a very impressive amount of enemies. They vary from good old stormtroopers to elite soldiers who have some kind of force power. You have all sorts of wildlife to fight. You've got robots, spiders, and the boss battles are these really large creatures, and those fights are just fantastic. The AI on the whole is decent, although some of the enemies can see you through walls. It's a bit annoying if you're trying to sneak up on a group, but it's not all the time, just occasionally. One-on-one duels against hardened enemies are really intense because button bashing just doesn't work. You've got to use strategy, you've got to find their weak points, and you've got to find the pattern of attack and then take them down when the opportunity arises. It's really satisfying during those epic battles, and when you do come out victorious, it's very, very enjoyable. And on the whole, the combat system is a really huge success. The game has a few puzzles to solve along the way, and they're not too difficult. Maybe a couple of them are a little bit hard to figure out, but after a few minutes you'll work it out. So as I said, Cal, the main character, he's lost his connection with the Force. And as you progress through the main story, Cal will have these little flashbacks at key moments. This is where you rediscover your skills, like Force Push, Slow Time, and many others. It's a nice way of progressing slowly and unlocking the maps via these new abilities. The game encourages exploration, and the more you search, the more you find. And it's because of the clever level design that the exploration is really good fun. It's really satisfying exploring the old forgotten temples and finding little treasures, historical information, or even like new ponchos for Cal to wear. Overall, the game has a very historical feel in terms of the Jedi. You get to understand a little bit more about the Jedi, some of the links to their origins, and also some things about the lightsaber and how lightsabers are created. The game has a lot of spiritual elements and kind of ancient temples, large architectural monuments, and it's full of very interesting and diverse Star Wars mythology. It's the spiritual aspect of the game that perfectly ties in with Cal's own personal journey, as Cal's connection to the Force was damaged, so he's rediscovering his Force powers while making his own discoveries about the Jedi. It's very well paired and it just works well thematically and in terms of how the storyline progresses throughout. The game looks great and graphically it's hard to say many bad things about it. There are some minor frame rate issues here and there, but it's not too often. The character animations are smooth, but some of the lip syncing is a little bit off. The environments and the way everything is lit really gives the game a lot of character and atmosphere. The game has a great photo mode. The one thing I liked about it was the ability to fine-tune each setting down to very small alterations. You can do this with the triggers or just use the analog sticks to do a broader change. You can alter the depth of field, and they've added a mesh-like system so you can visually see where the focal depth is. Honestly, that's a really helpful addition and it takes a lot of the eye strain away when you're trying to see what's in focus and what isn't. You've got a nice selection of filters you can use, and you can also add a spotlight if you need to give a little bit more source light to the main subject, and you can also alter the temperature of the spotlight. You can change the exposure, you can add film grain, and you can do a few other bits and pieces. It's one of the best photo modes I've used recently, even though at first it does seem a little bit limited. I think it's the fine-tuning aspect that I really appreciate the most, because it just makes finalising your photos a lot easier, and it means you can just get your photo done, deal with all the small details and get back into the game very quickly. So overall it's a very good photo mode and the game looks good, so you will be able to take some fantastic shots here. The music is amazing and really it just brings back so many memories for me of great movies of the past. The sound effects are fantastic, especially the lightsabers and the blasters. It's all classic to the franchise, and also the voice acting is pretty good on the whole. The atmospheric ambience of each of the different planets is really great and it adds so much depth, and if you've got a really good surround sound system or very high quality headphones, you will really appreciate those little small details. Okay, so what's good and what's bad? What's good? It's a great story that's faithful to the Star Wars universe and it shows a different side of the Jedi story. The combat system is challenging and forces you to consider each opponent's strengths and weaknesses. The level design is excellent and the puzzles and the platforming sections are really enjoyable. The story progression is well paced and the boss battles are absolutely intense. The actor who plays Cal does a really good job, as does Forrest Whitaker and some of the other cast. Generally the performances are good across the board. The game has fantastic sound and music, and the sound effects also, really, they just bring back so much nostalgia from Star Wars. And finally, the photo mode is user friendly and it's very sharp when fine tuning your virtual photographs. What's bad? The frame rate does occasionally drop during some of the busier sections or some of those maps that are quite complex, and when you're sprinting through them sometimes it will be a little bit choppy, sometimes a slow-mo effect happens. The two characters that are on your spaceship could have had a little bit more depth to them. They're not too bad, but I feel like they could have fleshed them out a bit more and made them a little bit more present in the story throughout. When you're fighting in narrow corridors, the camera angle can make it impossible to see what's going on sometimes. I also suffered 2 blue screen crashes, hard crashes, during gameplay. It was a little bit annoying because obviously the save points are quite well spread out, so if you're playing for like 35-40 minutes and it crashes like that, you got to do all that again. A little bit annoying, but it was only a couple of times, it's not a deal breaker. Okay, what's the verdict? Jedi Fallen Order is a fantastic game with intense combat, well designed levels and a satisfying storyline. It's the best Star Wars game I've played since Knights of the Old Republic, and it's great to finally see EA publish a decent Star Wars game. Finally, like 10 years later, but they got a good studio to make the game, the people who did the Titanfall games, you know you're getting quality there. So with all that being said, my score for Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order is 9 out of 10. If you're a Star Wars fan, you will just absolutely love this because it's really authentic to the source material. It's not trying to make some kind of political statement. It's just a really good story, a really good game, well structured, well created, in-depth combat, thoroughly enjoyable, and I would strongly recommend you to go and get it. Okay, that was the review. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. This is Photography Gamer, signing off. Thank you.